Everyone, so this is the first of our next two videos, which are going to look at applications of some of the techniques we've learned so far. And our first of these videos is going to be looking at dot density maps. So we won't have any new concepts for these two videos, but the three topics we're going to be covering in this video are first, what a dot density map is. Second, we're going to be creating our own dot density map. And finally, we're going to be analyzing our data by looking at some satellite imagery. Dot density maps are maps where each dot represents one single recording of a phenomenon. So thinking of our three vector geometries, our points, lines, and polygons, which geometry type would we use in a dot density map? We'd use points, right? Right, so let's look at an example to get an idea of what this might look like. So this is a map of shark sightings off the coast of South Africa, which Google made and you can access publicly. I'll put the URL in the assessment materials. And you can see that in each instance of a shark sighting is represented with a little shark or fish icon over here. And each instance of a beach is represented, two different kinds of beaches. So permanent beaches are represented by this little yellow figure, and temporary beaches are represented by the blue figure. So we can see very easily by looking at this map that there seem to be a higher concentration, since there are more icons, of shark sightings over here on this side of the shoreline as opposed to this side. Now, if we're going to be technical, Google right here is using icon shapes instead of dots to represent each instance of a phenomenon. But what's important is that they're using point data or point geometry in order to represent sightings. So with that in mind, we're going to be creating our own dot density map that shows the location of industries, businesses, and educational facilities in Middlebury, Vermont, where each instance of an industry, a business, and an educational facility will be represented as a dot. Now I'm going to do this a little differently than how we've done our other two maps. What I'm going to do is give you these three spreadsheets, which will be our data, and I'm going to show you what I want as a final product, but I'm not going to tell you guys how to do it. I think you're smart enough. This is going to count as part of your assessment for this video, or actually as all of your assessment for this video, so try to do a good job. And don't be too worried. I know all of these data tables have a lot of fields. If you look, don't worry about what they all mean. But I do want you to think about what fields you're going to be using as your locator data, hint hint, and what you're going to use to name your sites. I believe we're using primary address, though I'm not positive. Okay, and what I want is for your map to look like this at the end. So notice I've got three different layers, and each layer has a different type of facility, so industries, businesses, and educational. I've changed the style of my map quite a bit. I've changed the base map that I'm using. I'm not using the default. And I would like you to name your map by putting your last name and then dot density, the way I have over here. I'd like you to have this description here. I'm going to put this map in the share folder so that you can take a look at what I've done. And at this point, I would suggest that you pause the video right now and go ahead and make this map using the guidelines that I'll set out in the assessment materials, or you can keep watching and move on to how we would use this kind of a map. Okay, so I'm going to take a look at why this kind of map is useful. Let's look at we're looking at our completed dot density map. And unfortunately, we have a lot of overlap in our points, as you can see, because we can't change their size in Google. So to make this map easier to interpret, I am going to only visualize one layer at a time. So I'm going to uncheck the businesses and educational facilities and just look at industries. And I'm going to change my base map to satellite so I can see what's actually going on, where these points are. So for industries, you've noticed that the points seem to be grouped in more or less two different spatial locations. So I seem to have a large group of points over here to the north of town, and then one that's a bit more distributed over here. So for those of you, let's look at the first group. For those of you who are from Middlebury, any idea what these industries might be? Notice we're right off of Route 7. So these are all from Exchange Street, and this is where we have a big industrial park, and it seems to have the highest concentration of industrial sites in town. And then let's look at the other group. I'm not going to look at all of these, but I think this dot is particularly interesting. Any idea what this big white thing is? Anyone been on a geology field trip with Middlebury College? So this is the Omea marble quarry just outside of town, and it's a big industry within Middlebury. So that's something interesting to note. You can see it from quite far away. It's a very, very large quarry. So let's look at businesses next and see where they're located. So there are a lot more businesses, first of all. And no surprise, they seem to be concentrated in town. But you'll notice that they also seem to be very much concentrated based on where roads are. So they're concentrated around Route 7, which is one of the main roads that goes through town, and then also Route 125. I'm going to visualize this for a sec so we can see. So they really are all around Route 7 over here and Route 125 because these are where the most people pass by and the most accessible routes within Middlebury. And then let's look at educational facilities, and these are distributed quite differently. So they all seem to be concentrated over here to the west of town. Let's zoom in and take a look. So any idea what this might be? Think about our third video, that first reference map we made. So these are all college buildings, aren't they? So you can tell the college really skews educational facilities to this part of town. But we can see how heavily concentrated all those buildings are, which is pretty cool. Okay, so by doing this, I'm trying to give you guys a taste of how you can not only display data in an attractive way, but you can also then go ahead and make some analyses by looking at it. And this is the kind of thing that if we were to just look at the data tables that we have, we wouldn't have any idea of these kind of spatial relationships between our features. So pretty cool that you could do this so easily within Google and switch between base maps and visualize and unvisualize and make some pretty neat analyses very easily.